The first sound I heard in the dark was the hammer. Each strike rattled through the stone walls, a rhythm of pain and permanence. I was chained to the forge like all the others, iron cuffs biting my wrists, heat blistering my skin. The air was thick with ash, glowing embers falling like cruel snow. The masters called us tools. We were not meant to speak, only to work until bone gave way. Yet when I lifted my eyes, I saw her. She was unlike the others. Her skin bore a faint sheen of molten copper, patterns etched across her arms like glowing veins. Her hair was tied back with scraps of iron, her muscles taut from years at the anvil. But it wasn't her strength that struck me. It was her eyes, luminous amber, fierce even in chains. When the overseer struck her for faltering, she did not cry. She glared, and in that glare I felt a fire not even the forge could contain. Days blurred into nights in that pit. We labored under the whips, dragging iron into flames, shaping weapons we would never hold. The overseers, clad in obsidian armor, sneered as we bled into their creations. I had been cast here for defiance, she for bloodline. The blacksmith's daughter turned slave. Our chains bound us both, but hers were heavier with the weight of legacy. I did not speak to her at first. Words were dangerous here, but I listened to the rhythm of her hammer. It was not the rhythm of despair. It was defiance in steel. One night, when the overseers withdrew, I risked a whisper. "Why do you keep striking like you mean it?" She did not look at me, did not pause her work. Only when the hammer fell silent did she answer, "Because one day I will strike, and it will break more than iron." Her voice was low, steady, burning with promise. That was the first time I believed escape was not a dream. The forge was a world of fire and chains. Every day we shaped swords for the masters, weapons meant to keep us bowed. I learned quickly that she knew the forge better than any overseer. With scraps hidden under ash, she crafted edges sharper than permitted, nails disguised as slag, fragments of chain link filed down to keys. When I asked why she risked everything, she gave a faint smile. "Because no chain holds forever. Not iron, not mine, not yours." The overseers noticed my eyes lingered on her. They beat me for it, left me, bloodied on the stone. I thought she would avert her gaze, as most slaves did when punishment fell. Instead, she knelt beside me once the guards left, pressing a rag against my wounds. "They fear us," she whispered. "That's why they break you. That's why they strike me. Because if we stand together, they fall." In that moment, I saw her not as a prisoner, but as a spark. On the third month of toil, the masters brought in a beast to terrify us. A molten hound, its body a furnace of fire, chained, in black steel. They let it prowl the forge floor, jaws dripping heat, daring anyone to falter. The slaves shrank back in terror. But she stepped forward, her hammer in hand. The beast growled, heat warping the air, but she struck her hammer against the anvil, ringing steel into song. The sound pierced through the beast's rage, and it paused. Just for a moment. That was when I knew her fire could tame more than iron. From that day I worked beside her, not as stranger but as ally. She taught me the language of the forge, the way flames spoke, the way metal sang. Our overseers thought they chained us to labor, but in truth, they chained us together. We began to plot in silence, our whispers masked by the roar of fire. She knew where the overseers stored their keys, where the weak links in the forge's heart lay. "We don't just run," she said. "We break the forge. If we leave it standing, it will swallow others." One night, the overseer caught me pocketing a shard. He dragged me before the masters, demanding punishment. The crowd of slaves gathered, silent, afraid. But before the whip fell, she stepped forward, her voice echoing through the chamber. "If you strike him, you strike me too. My chains bind me, but they bind him also. Gasps rippled. To speak so was death, yet something shifted in the silence. Slaves lifting their heads, overseers pausing mid-breath. The masters laughed, amused at her defiance. They chained us side by side as punishment, forcing us to labor in unison, but their cruelty became our strength. With every hammer strike, we learned each other's rhythm, forging not just steel, but trust. One day, she whispered as sparks lit the darkness, we will strike together, and the forge will break. Weeks passed, and we waited. Each day she smuggled fragments into hidden caches, sharpening blades of rebellion under the masters' noses. I guarded her as best I could, shielding her from suspicion, though my scars grew in number. Still, she never faltered. Pain is just metal, she told me once. And like metal, it can be reshaped. The turning point came when the overseers brought in a new shipment of chains, meant for fresh slaves. She studied them as they were piled high, her eyes narrowing. These aren't for new slaves, she murmured. They're reforging the forge itself. I didn't understand at first, but then it struck me. The masters feared us enough to rebuild the heart of their prison, and that meant it was vulnerable. That night, under the cover of ash and embers, she pressed a crude blade into my hand. Tomorrow, she whispered, her eyes locking mine with fire, we strike the heart. Her chains clinked as she leaned closer. Not just yours, not just mine, ours. The morning came with thunder. Overseers marched us to the forge floor, their whips lashing the air. Sparks flew, hammers rang. But my hand clenched around the hidden blade. She met my gaze across the fire, her eyes blazing with defiance. And in that instant I knew, today the forge would bleed. The overseer's lash cracked and I moved. The blade flashed, chains snapped, and the forge floor erupted into chaos. Slaves gasped, overseers roared, and the fire roared higher still. Beside me, she tore her hammer free, swinging it with the fury of years caged. The first overseer fell beneath her strike, his obsidian helm shattering like clay. The forge was no longer theirs. It was ours. As flames spread, I felt her hand grip mine, chains still clinking between us. Together, she breathed, eyes fierce. We break it together. And we did, every strike of steel against stone, every roar of defiance echoing into the night. The forge trembled, and for the first time, hope burned hotter than fire. The flames spread faster than the overseers could control. Slaves shouted, some in fear, others in fury, as smoke filled the chamber. She swung her hammer, like it was destiny itself, breaking chains, shattering locks, freeing those who had forgotten the weight of freedom. I cut through cuffs with the crude blade she had forged for me, sparks flying with every strike. Overseers rallied, obsidian armor glinting through the smoke, but their whips faltered when faced with hammers turned against them. For the first time, the forge was not their dominion. It was a battlefield. We fought not as individuals, but as a tide. Every freed slave added to our strength. Every overseer that fell fed the fire of revolt. Beside me, she roared commands in her people's tongue, her voice carrying over the chaos like a war drum. I translated her intent into my own tongue, shouting to the humans and exiles who fought alongside us. In that crucible of fire and ash, we became one people, bound not by chains, but by rebellion. The masters themselves descended, towering in gilded armor, wielding weapons forged by our own hands. They thought their presence alone would shatter our defiance. But she stood tall, copper skin glowing in the firelight, her hammer resting across her shoulders. "You have taken our lives," she said, her voice cutting the roar to silence. "Now we take them back." And before they could answer, she struck the forge's great bell, its toll reverberating like thunder. It was the signal. The slaves surged forward. The battle was brutal. Steel clashed against steel, the air filled with sparks and screams. I fought like a man with nothing left to lose, cutting through enemies who had once called me lesser. She fought like a storm given flesh, every swing of her hammer crushing armor, every strike echoing with years of rage. Together we carved a path toward the heart of the forge, the great furnace where iron became chains and chains became prisons. When we reached it, I saw what she had meant. The furnace was alive, not just fire, but something older, bound in stone and steel. Its roar was more than heat, it was hunger. The masters fed it our lives, our labor, and it forged obedience. Her chains rattled as she stood before it, eyes burning. "This is the heart," she whispered. "Break this and—" "We break them!" But the furnace was guarded, not by men, but by constructs of molten metal, animated by the forge's own will. The constructs struck, molten limbs swinging with inhuman strength. My blade melted at the edge, sparks hissing as steel faltered. I staggered, certain death was upon me, until her hammer met the creature's chest. The sound was like a temple, collapsing, metal shattering under the weight of defiance. "Strike with me!" she roared. And together we did, again and again, our blows falling in rhythm, until the construct crumbled into slag. The others faltered as though their fire weakened when ours grew. When the last guardian fell, she planted her hammer in the stone, chest heaving. Around us, slaves rallied, their eyes wide with awe. For a heartbeat, silence ruled. Then, slowly, voices rose, not in fear, but in song. Her people sang first, a chant of freedom long forbidden. Then humans joined, rough and uncertain, but carried by the same fire. It was a song the overseers could not silence, a song the forge could not consume. We fled that night through secret tunnels she had mapped in whispers, leading hundreds into the wastes beyond the city. Freedom was bitter at first, cold, starless nights, empty bellies, wounds that burned. Yet even in pain, there was something new, choice. We built fires in the dark, tending to the injured, guarding one another. She sat across from me, hammer laid beside her, eyes reflecting the flames. "We are not done," she said. "The forge still stands. As long as it stands, they will hunt us. We must break it, root and crown." I wanted to argue. We had already won so much. But as I looked around at the scarred faces, the gaunt children, the hope flickering like the flames, I knew she was right. Freedom was not survival. Freedom was victory. And victory meant more than running. It meant breaking the chains forever. Scouts returned with grim news. The masters had rallied, reforging their armies from other forges across the land. They marched not just to reclaim us, but to make an example, to prove that defiance only delayed chains. Whispers of fear spread through our camp. Some wanted to scatter, others to surrender. But she stood, hammer in hand, her voice steady. "We will not scatter. We will not bend. We are not tools. They are. And tomorrow, we strike, the forge that made them." The night before the march, she sat beside me, chains still clinking faintly around her wrists. She had never cut them fully, never removed the cuffs, though we had keys aplenty. "Why do you still wear them?" I asked. She looked at the glowing embers, her face hard. "Because they remind me. These chains bound me once. Now they remind me why I fight." She turned to me, her amber eyes burning. "And tomorrow we fight together, until there is nothing left to break." Dawn came, and with it, fire on the horizon. The masters' armies approached, black lines stretching across the wastes. We marched to meet them, not as slaves, but as free. At the head, she strode beside me, her hammer glowing faintly as though it carried the fire of all who followed. And as the armies clashed, I realized this was no longer just survival. It was war. The battlefield was chaos, fire and steel colliding under a sky blackened by smoke. The master's soldiers came in disciplined ranks, their obsidian armor gleaming with the light of burning oil. But our people fought like those with nothing left to lose. Hammers rang against shields, broken chains were wielded as whips, and the cries of the freed shook the ground louder than war drums. I fought in their midst, blades slick with ash and blood, never straying far from her side. She was the storm. At the center of the battle, her hammer-breaking lines, her voice a beacon in the smoke. The first wave broke, then the second, but the master's army was endless. For every soldier cut down, another took their place. Fear clawed at the edges of our line, whispers of retreat rippling through the ranks. She strode to the front, her chains clinking like war bells. Raising her hammer high, she roared, "You are free! Do not kneel again!" Her voice cut through the despair, and with it, our line surged forward once more. By dusk, the plain was littered with bodies, but the masters had not broken. Their banners still rose, their commanders still barked orders. And then we saw it. The great forge itself, looming in the distance, its towers glowing red, its chimneys vomiting fire into the night. It was more fortress than workshop, its walls bristling with weapons we had been forced to build. If we could not destroy it, everything we had bled for would crumble. That night, around the campfires, we made our choice. Some wanted to flee, to scatter across the wastes and vanish. But she stood tall before them all, the firelight painting her copper skin in hues of gold and crimson. "You can run," she said, her voice low, steady. "But the chains will find you. Or you can stand. If we fall tomorrow, we fall free. If we rise, the forge will fall, and none will ever wear chains again." The silence that followed was heavier than steel, but then, one by one, voices rose in agreement. We would march. Dawn broke blood red. The forge fortress towered ahead, its gates braced, its walls alive with defenders. The ground shook as the masters unleashed their last horrors, golems of molten steel, their bodies dripping fire, their eyes hollow with the furnace's hunger. Fear rippled through our lines, but she stepped forward, hammer resting on her shoulder, her chains still bound to her wrists. "These were made to break us," she said, eyes locked on the monsters. "Now we break them." And with a cry that shook the sky, she charged. The clash was unlike anything before. Her hammer met molten steel, sparks bursting like stars. I fought beside her, every strike of my blade an echo of hers. The golems fell one after another until the gates of the forge loomed unguarded. We stormed them, battering them down with stolen rams and furious will. Inside, the air burned hotter than any sun. Rows of slaves still labored, eyes hollow, unaware that freedom had come. The masters awaited us in the heart of the forge, clad in armor forged from centuries of suffering. Their leader, a towering figure with eyes like coal, sneered at us as though we were insects. "Chains are eternal," he spat. She stepped forward, hammer in hand, her voice steady as stone. "Not anymore." The fight was brutal. His strength was monstrous, his blade a storm of fire. I staggered beneath his blows, nearly crushed, but she held firm. Her hammer rang against his armor again and again, cracks spreading with each strike. At last she looked at me, eyes blazing. "Together!" she cried. I raised my blade as she raised her hammer, and in unison we struck. The sound was like a mountain splitting. His armor shattered, his body falling into the flames that had once obeyed him. The forge itself screamed. Its fires erupted, walls cracking, towers collapsing. She seized my hand, chains rattling between us, and pulled me through the chaos. Slaves poured out, freed at last, their voices rising in a chorus that drowned the dying roar of the furnace. The forge, once eternal, crumbled into ruin. When dawn rose again, it was over. The forge was ash, the masters scattered, their empire broken. We stood among the freed, battered and bloodied, but alive. She still wore her chains, though they were shattered, hanging loose from her wrists. I touched them gently. "You could cast them off now," I said. She looked at me, her amber eyes fierce but softened with something else. Hope. "No, I keep them. To remember. To remind. But they bind me no longer." The people gathered around us, voices rising, chanting not for crowns, not for relics, but for freedom. For her. For us. In that moment, I knew history would not remember me as human or her as alien. It would remember us as the ones who broke the forge. And when she took my hand, chains clinking softly in the wind, she whispered the words that would become legend. "Together, nothing holds.